Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Choose to Think Inspirational Podcast. I'm so excited you're here. Today on the show, we have James Edwards. And James is featured in and has been an incredible resource for the creators of the film Innovation Race. James is the founder and executive director of Conservatives for Property Rights and is the patent advisor for the Eagle Forum Education and Legal Defense Fund. He's an outspoken Christian, and part of why he is involved in the fight to protect patent rights is because God made us to create. Up until 2011, our country was dedicated to protecting this calling. The Bible largely shaped the worldview of our founding fathers, with our Constitution written not long after the Great Awakening. A few points that the Bible shares about innovation. Number one, God is the creator, and he's creative. Number two, God is the owner of his creations and has claims to what he has made. The 10 Commandments are essentially property rights. Number three, we are made in God's image, and he has endowed us with his highest qualities, including being creative. Number four, the creation mandate. Adam and Eve were called to work, be fruitful, tend to God's creation. God gave us ownership and creative initiative. James argues that we have to protect those patent rights, just as we need to protect our other freedoms and religious liberties. The founding fathers believed everyone is made in the image of God and respected and protected property rights, including intellectual and creative properties. Article 1, Section 8, protect patent rights, and this includes women and people of color. And this created a vibrant creative culture in our first 200 years as a nation. The film Innovation Race is currently available through virtual event cinema and has rolled out on streaming platforms beginning in January of this year, 2023. Now, let me tell you a little bit more about James Edwards. He advises companies, trade associations, and conservative organizations on patent policy. He's a founder and executive director of Conservatives for Property Rights. He's the patent advisor for the Eagle Forum Education and Legal Defense Fund, as I said, and co-director of the Inventors Project. He participates in the Medical Device Manufacturers Association's patent working group. He mentors startups and early stage companies, largely in the med tech space, and he's involved in several IP-centric projects. He's a Lincoln Fellow in 1998 and Claremont Institute and former speechwriter at the Republican National Committee. He authored Property Rights, the Key to National Wealth and National Security, and has been published in the Washington Times, Investors Business Daily, Fox Business, Real Clear Policy, and IP Watchdog, to name a few. Edwards served as legislative director to Republican Edward Bryant, the Republican of Tennessee, representative there in Tennessee, then a member of the U.S. House Judiciary Committee and handled IP legislative matters. Edwards also worked on the staff of John Duncan from Tennessee, the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee, and Senator Strom Thurmond, RSC. In addition, he was an associate executive at the Healthcare Leadership Council. Edwards earned a PhD at the University of Tennessee and bachelor's and master's degrees at the University of Georgia. So you can tell, oh my goodness, what an intro for him, right? What an introduction to this gentleman who has so graciously agreed to be on our show today. So without further ado, we're going to just dive right in. And I want us to open up our conversation with everything creative. I want to tap in a little bit more into the whole notion of God creating us as creatives and with the ability to create. So without further ado, here's James. So here we have you, Jim, and I am so excited. The listeners have already heard or seen me present your bio, and which is just fascinating and amazing, as we were chatting about a moment ago. But thank you so much for appearing on the show and agreeing to come on.
It's my pleasure, Victoria, and thank you so much for having me.
Oh,
I
you're
look
quite
forward to this conversation.
Yeah, me too, because I kept thinking, okay, how can we connect the dots between our thoughts? Because that's kind of the emphasis that we have here on the show, choosing to think. So can you help us, Jim, to kind of choose to think when it comes to innovation and creativity, just connect the dots with all of that and our faith. And then we're going to move on into the movie in just a moment.
Certainly. Well, if you think about it, it's pretty straightforward. As you and I know from Scripture is, I mean, about every other page, there's some reference to God as the creator and or to his owning the things he created. So you've got, of course, Genesis 1:1, but then, I mean, even just when you may not be expecting it, like a random verse in the gospel, or a random verse in an epistle, or like in Hebrews, it may be just a reference to the God who created the heavens and the earth, or some phrase along those lines, just reiterating throughout. God is the creator of the universe. He created everything. He created the expanse of the universe and the incredibly minute things that are, I mean, subatomic particles, things that we only know about theoretically, but we know something's there, but nobody's seen it. But scientists have figured that out. God made all of that. So he is, and of course, the creator. He created human beings as his image bearers. So that brings us to mankind, or humankind. Oh, what else do we see in Scripture is that God owns that which he has created. And that is stamped throughout, in a similar manner, throughout Scripture, that God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, and
Right.
on and on and on. He owns everything. And of course, the whole premise of being human beings is the tithe of 10% of our income to church is not designating that only 10% belongs to God. It's saying, here's the token of which he asked for, but he owns every cent I bring in or you bring in for a paycheck. He owns everything we own. So ultimately, he's the owner. However, under common grace, God has been gracious to us, both believers and unbelievers, in common grace, where everybody who is a human being endowed as the image bearer of God is creative. There's a creative faculty that we each have, and it manifests itself some more in science and math, some more on fine arts sides, some of us just kind of in writing, some of us other things, but everybody has some creativity, even if they don't recognize it. And then second is, everybody inherently owns what they create or what they earn. And you see this reflected throughout Scripture too. The benefits of the fruits of our labor, that belongs to us. Temporarily here, but ultimately God. But still, God entrusts us with those things that we make, that we earn. And so ownership and creativity are the two core things. They're qualities of God. They're also qualities of man. So that's kind of the starting point, I'd say, with respect to the scriptural view and foundation for creativity, innovation.
So why is any of this even important for 21st century Christians? What's the big deal about it?
Well, in the 21st century, we are seeing building blocks at the increasing levels at a magnificent rate of expansion, of innovation, invention, creativity. And all of that builds on, a number of things. But if you look at the scope of history, the first several thousand years, there wasn't a whole lot of progress, say, from, the first human beings, first societies, how they get around, walk or ride some beast.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much it for a long, long time. How do we get around today? Well, a whole lot more ways,
Mm-hmm.
and much faster. We cover more ground in an hour than would have been covered in a couple of days by walking. So all of that is made possible by property rights, private property rights, which gets to ownership and to the fruits of your labor, owning and enjoying the fruits of your labor. If you're the inventor, this is property that did not previously exist.
Mm-hmm.
So if you create a microchip that empowers some function on a smartphone, or on your computer, or on your car, those are things that were property that previously did not exist. So it's not ex nihilo exactly like God's creativity, but it's kind of in a similar manner.
Okay. So what I'm trying to get at, though, Jim, is why should this be important to me as a Christian woman living? I live in Kentucky, and I recognize that, yes, God is creator and that he owns everything. Often I'm like, God's got deep pockets when it comes to my money. I just like, okay, it comes in, it goes out. I'm just going to give it away because it's really all God's anyway. So I understand that God is creator and that God owns it all. And then he created us in his image, and we have some of those same privileges, so to speak. But why is this really? Why do I even need to be concerned about this? And we're going to segue into the movie in a little bit, but
Sure.
And what all of that means. And that's absolutely fascinating to me, patent rights and all of that, and how we're kind of selling out to other countries and so forth. But why should I even care a hoot about this? Let's say I recognize I'm creative and I do a podcast. I love to write. What's the big deal about it, though? Where's the concern or the real hot topic point here?
Here's the big deal, and why it should matter to every person is we're all beneficiaries of the inventions of others for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't invent my own car. I didn't invent my own house. I didn't invent my own computer. I didn't invent my own phone. I didn't invent anything of that nature. It would be a long day before I'd even invent a small portion of any of that.
Okay.
But somebody did. Many people did. And the way that they did so was under the incentive of private property rights, their ownership of the property they created, the invention they came up with that did not previously exist. And then under the patent system in the US, which is property rights oriented, its foundation is premised on private property rights, is if they didn't have an incentive, a financial incentive of exclusive rights to their property for a limited time of the patent, there would be no investors putting money in development of a new, cancer cure, right, or a new disease treatment. There would be no incentive for anybody to invent the microchips for that empower a specific function. You've got to have the combination of having the only way that patent rights work is if there's secure property rights in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what enables humongo, deep-pocketed investors to put money into something that's a long-term risk and a lot of failures along the way, but eventually there's success maybe, and at that point they get return on their investment. So if that doesn't, that is made possible by the patent rights. And if that doesn't happen, there's no new 5G. There's going to be no new 6G cell service, wireless service. There's going to be no new miracle drugs. There's going to be no new anything of that sort of level of high technology in all respects of technology.
Gotcha. So we need to protect
So
those
you
rights.
I benefit from
Right.
their creations. That's Phyllis Schlafly, the iconic conservative leader. Her father was an inventor, and she watched him invent and get a patent on an invention. And this is funny to me, but in the midst of the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment fight, she was saying, we don't need an ERA amendment to our Constitution. The one who is empowering women in America and abroad are inventors. They're creating labor-saving devices that make our lives where we don't have to go to the creek to wash our clothes. We don't have to go and split wood for the fire, to cook our food or warm our houses, things like that. So she was making that argument that inventors are the ones who elevate the standard of living for women in particular in that instance, but in general, everybody in society benefits in some manner from that invention, from that innovation.
So is it that I'm just kind of taking advantage of this system? Or taking it for granted? Because
yes.
I don't often think about this at all.
It's taken for granted.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the problem.
Okay, so what do we do? How do we fix that? What's my role in this?
That's a great question. I think you're doing a good role of expounding on this issue a little bit, this topic today. The thing is more STEM education, getting kids involved in math and science. I mean, if somebody sat me down earlier in my life, I might have been more inclined toward that, because I've really learned a lot and become more interested. But I guarantee you, science and math, if you look at my old report cards, you'll see science and math were not my academic strong suits.
Oh my. So we can encourage our children in that area, but give
them things to play with that are technological instead of playing video games. Remember years ago, there used to be, and I don't know, there are probably still some varieties, but a chemistry set or an electronics set, and set them off, showing them, giving them access to the tools and old gadgets that you don't mind getting torn up, and see if you can take this apart and put it back together. And that's the common theme I've heard and read about from inventors, is they started as kids and they were curious. Curiosity was developed in them, and they were allowed to and encouraged to disassemble and reassemble gadgets.
Wow.
A radio or something. Now, obviously, don't give them your cell phone that you just paid $1,000 for and want to keep in service for a couple more years. But
that's right. I love that you brought in just the child raising aspect of all of that, and what we can do to stimulate that curiosity, and what types of fears should we have? And I'm just going to use that kind of loosely, or a better word maybe would be concerns. What should be our concerns about taking all of this for granted, or not, just maybe having an aloof attitude or mindset about all of the technology that surrounds us and that we use every single day? Any concerns there? What can happen if we don't educate our children properly, if we don't increase that curiosity, if we don't give them some hands-on robotic kits or science kits, or increase funding for STEM education and so forth? What What are the concerns if we don't?
That's a great question. There are a couple that come to mind. One is there are two types of entities out there. Primarily, there are those who are the inventors, the creators of things, and they rely on patents, and entrepreneurs who rely on commercializing those inventions based upon the patent exclusivity. Patents grant exclusive rights for the term of the patent, which currently is 20 years. So um, that's one group. The other group is those who are implementers or users of other people's patents, other people's inventions. So you get, if you look at your iPhone, and it's got probably 400 or 500 patents represented in that one device.
Wow.
And maybe more, but there are hundreds of patents that are represented there. And so that's a company that just basically aggregates other people's things and put it into a fancy attractive package, and just make sure that it works. But they're using other people's inventions, so they don't have the same respect or need. They tend to be incumbent companies, large incumbents in the market. And so what patents do is enables newcomers to challenge them and move progress of science and useful arts, as the term in the Constitution is. But that's a market threat to them, because their current status is they're number one. So they are trying to weaken the patent system. And that goes for big tech companies, that goes for Chinese national champions. All those kind of entities are not so fond of the patent system. So they are working decidedly toward weakening our patent system and patent systems more generally. Another set is those who are misguided in the sense that they think, well, heck, and I can tell you, you're one of y'all's congressman, Thomas Massey from Kentucky, an inventor with, what's he got, 30 or 40 patents. And he has said frequently that, I love inventing, but I would not have ever done it for free. I'm not going to do it just for fun. I mean, that's a hobby. If you're an inventor, you're not pursuing it as a hobby. So that's what you need, is the ability to commercialize it and take advantage of your invention. So that's one group that's harmed by the weakening of our patent system. Then the other side of the coin, and this kind of gets us toward the innovation race film, is China has positioned itself in a manner that today it as a kind of as a civil military fusion model, where everybody, private, quote unquote, private and public, and government and Chinese entities are trying to advance the interests of China, and they strengthened their patent system while we've weakened ours. They're aggressively seeking to take the global lead in emerging technologies. So that would be biopharmaceuticals, that would be wireless technology, that would be artificial intelligence, advanced computing, quantum computing, all of those things. They're trying to outdo us and take the lead over the whole world. So that's serious, and that's what that particular film illustrates. But it's broad. The threat is broader than that.
Yeah, these are one little topic is so much deeper than you first think. Like, I can ask a question and you're answering it, and then 20 other questions are popping up in my head at the same time, because it's I'm getting a little bit of a sense of that. You think you go to Walmart, everything's made in China. It's always been made in China, but that is manufactured, correct? That's not necessarily patented there. And now you're saying that China, for example, is strengthening their patent system, whereas ours is being weakened. And that's kind of scary in a way because it's like we're outsourcing everything. What's the end result? My head is kind of just swimming now with all of these thoughts. But talking about the US patent system, I think I have a question that all the listeners might want to know and be very curious about. And I'm definitely curious about, because I think it's safe to say that most of us at one time or another have said, hey, I've got this idea and it's a great idea and we need this. It's from the necessity. You're chopping potatoes and you're like, wow, I wish I had a knife that did this or a peeler that did this. And so we all have those ideas. But the next step from that is, well, I could never get a patent because it costs too much. How much does a patent cost in general?
Top of my head, I don't remember what the fees are at this point. I don't remember specific dollar figures. I think it's in the like between 5 and 20,000. There are fees, lower fees if it's like an entrepreneur or an independent inventor. There are, I guess, price breaks, we'll call them, on the fees for those, small scale invention.
Right. And do you see that as problematic? I mean, I was talking with someone, my dad was in the intensive care unit at the hospital a couple of months ago. And one of the nurses there, he and I were talking about some things that we really needed. And he had just a terrific idea and he had pursued so far as to get a patent on his idea. And he said, but it's going to cost me $20K. I believe that's the amount
that sounds about right.
Yeah, that he gave. And, unless I guess, it would be hard for me to just say, okay, I believe so much in this that I'm going to go forward with that. That's a pretty hefty chunk of change there. And, but that was a stumbling block. And I don't know how much he researched it either, or if he looked at, okay, I'm an independent inventor, there are some price breaks there for me. I'm not sure, but are there other ways around that? Like if we have an idea for just something so simple, and the reason he and I were talking about it is because when they get blood from my dad, who's in his 80s, and he has, very thin geriatric skin, just putting that rubber tourniquet on there on the arm can twist his skin in a way that almost can tear it. And so he and I were chatting, the nurse and we're like, wouldn't it be nice if one side of the rubber had just some nice soft cloth on there so that it wouldn't quite tug and pull. He said, oh, that would also be great for babies because that's babies have such tender skin. Right. But there you have the idea and you're like, and it wouldn't really be that expensive, I wouldn't think, because rubber, but I just don't know. I mean, the thoughts of 5, 10, 20K, I don't know. I mean, what do we just try to pitch that idea to somebody? Or I think I read in your bio that something about medical technology, that's something you're interested in. Did I have that right?
Yes. I guess the answer is the options are, you need to check out who in your locality, who in your state are the angel investor groups. Who are the angel investors who are interested in helping people just like you and your listeners, who may have an idea. Now, the thing about it is, if you disclose too much detail about it, then that's public disclosure, even if you're doing that in just a fairly private conversation. So if it's publicly disclosed in some manner, that gives away the details, that invalidates the opportunity to patent it. It's no longer patentable. Then it's already in the public in the public domain. So to find out who angel investors are, and that's probably a good way to start. And then there's the typical, they call it friends, family, and fools. So just raising money of anybody in your circle, family, friends, and fools. People with more money than at least than they have sense.
Okay, you're right.
But they're willing to, if they're willing to give you some, then that help underwrite that initial thing. The main thing I'd say is that most people I've talked to, inventors, swear by the doing it right and doing it wrong. The wrong way is to try to do the patent application on your own. It's worth whatever the fairly small amount that a patent attorney would charge to prepare it. It feels like a lot of money, but the cost, if you don't get the claims constructed correctly and all of that, could cost you far more in the future. So it's really an investment. It's not an expenditure, if you want to look at it.
Right. Oh, that is good counsel too. I really appreciate that. And that was another question I had. It's not just the money, it's also the application itself. And, it seems to be fairly complicated. Now, I don't know what it's like in China. Do you, I mean, do they have the same kind of, you've got to go through an application and then fork out a big, heavy chunk of change? Is it very similar?
I don't know all of the ins and outs of the Chinese system. In general, it's comparable in terms of you have to have an application. It has to be examined. It has to be proved patentable, whatever that means under their law. It has to be demonstrated that it works, it's new, and those kinds of things. But just more general statement about the Chinese patent system is it's kind of monkeyed aped the American system that we used to have. It really takes a lot of the strengths of our patent system of 30 or 40 years ago and puts them in place. So it's got a stronger system now because they mimicked our system when it was at its strongest. Say around the 80s.
Yeah, that is so curious. And I want to circle back to the movie because I want us to really, really promote that. And let me read just for a second about Innovation Race. It says this: for the past century, America has been the world leader in ideas, invention, and innovation, developing new technologies to solve complex issues as well as tools to make our lives more comfortable and efficient is the realization of the American dream for many. But our grip on, quote, world leader status is loosening as China has emerged as a powerful political and industrial force. Today, China is threatening American innovation by exploiting weaknesses in U.S. patent protection, and big tech is letting them get away with it. Innovation Race explores these critical issues impacting all Americans and proposes solutions for how we can restore U.S. dominance in invention, technology, and innovation. And listeners can also go to the innovationracemovie.com to get more information on that. But is there anything you'd like to kind of sprinkle in there, Jim, about that film, please?
Sure. It's a very good documentary. And you say the word documentary and people's eyes sometimes say, I'm not going to watch a documentary. It's boring. It is anything but boring. It's pretty darn engaging. The Innovation Race gives this, it draws a good picture and illustrates the state of play on our weakening of our own patent system and the corresponding strengthening of the Chinese system and China's goals at taking the innovation lead in the emerging technologies across sectors, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. AI, quantum computing, biotech, biopharmaceuticals, all those kinds of things, the microchips. So things that are crucial to modern life and industry, so and science, it is, and military. I mean, all of those come into play. The innovation race shows that. And one thing that's unique about the movie is they pull through a thread through that, and they talk to a lot of bipartisan the experts who really know their stuff, and they tell about what's going on. But one thing that is a thread that runs through that film is a little narrative, a little revisiting an illustration. It's a student inventor and her attempts to invent, what she's working on and how that plays out as she goes along. So I'm not going to tell you the end of the story on that thread through there, but it really kind of brings things from talking head experts to focusing on a real life example. And I thought that was very engaging aspect.
Yeah, very creative. Yeah, I love that. That's a good element throughout that film. And so what would you say, one or two things that we can do in addition to getting our kids involved in science and technology and hands-on and, fostering that curiosity in them? What else can we do to now that we're aware? Because really and truly, before, I never gave much thought about it. Someone pitched you as a guest on the podcast and from Biscuit Media Group, and I think I have that right. And I was,
Yes.
was so delighted. It was fascinating to read all about this, but I really didn't know a lot about it. And now that I feel like I know more, and I think after watching the film also, it will spark even more of that interest. But what do I do? What can I do? What's happening in Washington, for example? Where do we show support to help in some way?
Well, I appreciate your call to action question. The main thing I'd say is, I mean, in addition to fostering creativity, curiosity, inventiveness in children, is, and in yourself, is to learn what's going on in Washington, that are the battles that are being played out both in the administrative branch and the legislative branch with regard to things that would weaken and or strengthen our patent system. Like I mentioned, Congressman Massey of Kentucky, he's got a bill that would effectively repeal a 2011 law that has been so destructive, and he would reset not only that, but a number of Supreme Court rulings that have been unfortunate and weakening of our patent system and patent rights. So his bill would be the premier bill I'd point to. It's called the Restoring America's Leadership in Innovation Act.
Oh, okay.
So Restoring America's Leadership and Innovation Act. The Massey bill is one thing. There's a Stronger Patents Act, which is a good step in the right direction. There are other things that are good legislation, but there are also many bills that are destructive. And this goes in a lot of ways. And one particular course, and just becoming aware of what those challenges and issues are, what the opportunities are, and weighing in with your lawmakers. Let your congressmen and senators know that you are interested in this and concerned about what's at stake. Because it really is. I mean, the contrast we were talking about between the U.S. and now today's Chinese patent system. I mean, the Chinese patents used to be nothing. It used to be, we're just going to steal American stuff and just copy it and mass produce it. Well, it ain't that anymore. Now they've got top-notch inventors whom the Chinese incentivize them. They'll pay them bonuses and awards for inventing and getting patents issued on their inventions. So they're playing for keeps. We're squandering our patent system, which again, it's biblically based. You're talking about creativity that God instilled in us by his grace, as well as the right to own what we create or the fruits of our labor. So that's what's the issue here is it's squandering the gifts that God has provided us, the means by which we improve society for more than just ourselves, or we yield that over to adverse parties and countries.
Wow, I love how you just brought us full circle. That was genius. I don't know how you did that, but you just kind of pulled it all back together for us, and I really appreciate that. Sometimes that's my job, but you did it. So thank you for that. And I also want to know, how can we see that movie? Where can we send our listeners and viewers?
The film availability will be announced in different places where it will be showing and so forth. I'd say go to the Innovation Race, the movie.
Okay.
I believe it's .com, if I recall correctly.
That's correct. Yes.
That would be to where to find out where to see the film. And before too long, it will be available like on Amazon Prime and Netflix, maybe on not Netflix, Apple. What is it? I forgot. They changed the name of their system, so I don't remember what the new, more recent name is. It used to be the iTunes store, but.
Gotcha. Well, I will make sure when this episode actually drops that we have all of those links current so that folks can just click on those and get on over there. So I can't wait to watch it. I know it's supposed to be January. Here we are recording early January, but I was thinking it's going to be fairly soon for that to begin to air. I thought maybe it had, but I haven't.
I think it's coming soon if it hasn't already. I know there have been some screenings. I know they had one back in the fall that I went to in Washington.
Okay, well, I'll make sure that we include all of that in the show notes, and I'll do a little bit more research on that. So, but thank you so much for coming on the show. I think now you've given us so much to think about in number one, we do take advantage of so many technologies. Number two, we do have responsibility to help our children in this area, and not just just let it be or whatever, but that's something so important. I have grandchildren, so I can encourage them. And matter of fact, my granddaughter, who's 8, she loves science, loves it. And so, what better Christmas gifts to get and birthday gifts and so forth than to just stimulate that curiosity. And as a home educator, we home educated for 20 years. So launching 4 children and took them the whole way through. And so I love that. I love that aspect of that curiosity and creating that interest. And then also number 3, we can increase our awareness just by watching this movie and getting another sense of what we're up against here and why it's so important. And then of course, contact our legislators and get an eye, another perspective on what's going on in our country and where we can show support there politically. So thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been just fascinating to talk to you, Jim.
Great to talk to you too, Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you so much.